I'm waiting for a wave. Okay, I have a wave. Good evening, everyone. I'm Jane Cowell, Executive Director of Engagement and Partnerships here at State Library of Queensland, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all to State Library of Queensland this evening for the second Queenslanders in Conversation talk for 2017. Welcome also to our online viewers if you're watching from Facebook Live or via the State Library website. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of this land and pay respects to their ancestors who came before them and to their elders past, present and future. The location of State Library on Kurupa Point was historically a significant meeting, gathering and sharing place for Aboriginal people, and we proudly continue that tradition here today. And it's really a lovely thing that State Library continues with that learning and gathering here to discuss community issues. I also acknowledge and welcome our event partner, ABC, in particular tonight's facilitator and ABC Radio Brisbane presenter, Steve Austin. Our four panellists who will be sharing their insights and expertise with us today, Dr. Claire Mason, Adrian Osman, Professor David Peetz and Tony Ryan, distinguished guests and ladies and gentlemen. State Library is a place for communities to come together, share stories and knowledge, to learn, be inspired and also to create. We are a community hub where everyone is encouraged to have a voice and we celebrate those diverse voices. This year, the State Library is exploring the theme of digital futures, exploring how technology has given us new tools to question, understand, imagine and improve the world in which we live. As we venture deeper into the digital age, what implications will there be to our freedoms, our rights, our privacy, and does it matter, our security and our responsibilities, what it is to be a digital citizen online as well as in our day-to-day communities? Who will own the digital future and what values will we strive to maintain as we explore this new world? The Queenslanders in Conversation series is one of the programs held at State Library during this year to provide a platform for insightful discussions on the massive changes occurring in our world through digital innovation. Through discussion, we will reflect on where we are now and look forward into the future. Tonight's conversation is exploring the future of work. We will discuss how technological advancements are transforming the way we live, work, interact and connect with each other. Some interesting questions will be posed and debated. Will future economies cause a greater distance between socioeconomic classes, or will it help us all to live better lives? Today's panel will bring a diverse set of voices, a social scientist, a startup consultant, a professor of employment relations and an education futurist. It is sure to be a lively discussion, that's the challenge to you all, about our hopes and fears for the future of work, told from a range of different participants. Queenslanders in Conversation is designed to be a participatory event, so we invite you to join the conversation online using the hashtag #DigitalFutures. On-site guests are also welcome to join in the discussion when Steve throws the microphone to the audience for questions later in the evening. So please get your thinking caps on and join the conversation. You may like to join us at other activities and events during the year, including our Digital Futures Lab, currently in our SLQ Gallery on Level 2, which is a hybridised lab, studio, game space and exhibition, and you can get to play with virtual reality, and we have some very regulars who come back sheepishly and say, "I'm here again, can I use that?" For a deeper experience of the Digital Futures Lab, come along to our Wednesday Playdays each week to try your hand at awesome cutting-edge technologies. You can program a robot, discover 3D printing and contribute to our augmented timeline. Our next Queenslanders in Conversation series will be coming up on the 9th of August and ask the question, are smart cities for everyone, or does it exclude certain people? If you'd like any further information on State Library events or exhibitions, please have a chat to one of our staff, and they're around here, or head to our website or pick up a brochure from the registration desk on your way out this evening. Just a reminder, as this event is being recorded and live streamed, the front doors have been locked. If you need to exit the venue early, please do so from the rear of the auditorium. We are proud to be partnering with the ABC for tonight's Queenslanders in Conversation talk, and I'm pleased to now hand over to tonight's facilitator, Steve Austin. Thank you.
Most grateful. I think you'll enjoy tonight because whether or not you realise it, you have been already controlled by artificial intelligence. Your car has an artificial intelligence program in it that was more powerful than what sent the men to the moon. My motorcycle on the way here analysed how I was riding, whether I was efficient and how I braked, and adjusted the engine accordingly. The path on which you took through the street lights, down through the streets, governed the street lights and when they came on and when they came off. All around you at the moment, it's not that artificial intelligence is possible, artificial intelligence is changing your day. It's changing every element of your life. And according to Stephen Hawking, Steve Wozniacki, Andrew Keane, the former editor of Wired magazine, we need to be afraid because they think at some point artificial intelligence will become what psychologists call self-aware. In other words, they will think for themselves. And there are many wonderful science fiction movies that are based on the implications, best known as Terminator. All of a sudden, the machine Skynet decides that people are the problem. Solve people, you solve the problem, get rid of people. Now, my guests have not a dystopian view of the future or where we're living, but quite, in some ways, an optimistic, almost utopian view, mostly, but not entirely. Because you're living in the fourth industrial revolution. Now, there's some controversy about the applicability of that phrase, but essentially it is the ramping up of the digital revolution, and you'll hear from my guests what that means. Claire Moore is a senior social scientist with Data 61 at CSIRO. She's got a very funny story about how that name came about. She may tell you at some point. She has been taking a close look at understanding the opportunities and challenges associated with our reliance on the digital world. Tony Ryan is an education futurist. He's particularly worked in a number of schools, colleges and TAFEs. Adrian Osman is that strange being known as an entrepreneur, whereby the fact that it's a good thing if you don't have secure employment. We'll have Adrian explain. And Professor David Peetz has been looking at job markets and the way we work, the whole of unions, collective bargaining and the whole lot more. And it's not on his CV, but I can tell you he's actually a great poet and songwriter and musician. So would you please welcome our panel. Claire Mason, where do we see digital disruption today? What's the best, most obvious examples we see it today?
In the world of work, I assume we're starting
yes.
with. Well, so to date, most of the impact of digital technology has been in the low-skilled jobs. We've seen the loss of bank tellers, photographic developers, factory workers, but with the exponential rate of development in technology that we're seeing now, what happens when you've got an exponential growth curve is that the massive impacts are seen further down the track. And experts who understand how digital technology is developing argue that we are right now around the halfway point, at the stage where the impacts start to get huge. And so
you say things are only really starting to speed up now?
Only just starting to warm up.
So all the disruption, all the job changes...
It's been slow so far.
The devastation of my industry, the media, you ain't seen nothing yet?
Apparently. So the thing that is happening now is that artificial intelligence and machine learning is beginning to take over some of what we traditionally consider mid-skilled jobs and middle-income jobs. As long as the job has some degree of routineness or rule-based decision-making, then it's much more open to being automated than ever before. And so researchers out of Oxford University, Frey and Osborne, have taken experts who understand the way in which digital technology is developing and developed an estimate of how many of the jobs that we are doing today could be automated over the next 2 decades. And they're estimating that 47% of the jobs that humans currently do could be done by machines in that time frame. Now, there has been subsequent work, which is possibly more fine-grained, which gives us estimates of 9%. But even 9% of us losing our jobs is a really huge concern. And so a lot of the work we're trying to do is to understand what types of skills will be important in the future and how we can support people to make the transition to the new ways of working. We're not saying there won't be jobs in the future, but we are saying that those jobs will look very different and possibly we'll be working under new kinds of work arrangements.
Tony, Ryan, have schools, educational institutions and others been good, bad or otherwise at preparing for this? We're halfway there, and only now it's about to start ramping up, says Dr. Moore.
And she is correct.
Although I'm Dr. Mason.
Dr. Mason, I'm sorry. Crikey, where did that come from?
Oh, cool. You know, I wouldn't mind reframing this in this sense. I think we need to start telling kids in education and in the world in general that the future is a promise and not a threat. Now, I love all the tech, and believe me, I can tell all the stories as well, and I concur with what Claire was saying. I agree with a whole lot of it. I think we're going to increasingly see a more humanistic perspective on things, and that'll come through in education. Now, when you ask about education, how long's a piece of the proverbial? Because it's the biggest profession on the planet. It's full of good people doing great work who are just caught in the wrong stagecoach.
Education at the moment is about benchmarking, about testing, about getting over hurdles.
Yep.
Is that preparing us for Dr. Mason's ramping up?
There are a minority of well-meaning people who put in good efforts, especially with what is called enterprise education. We'll need to do much more of that. The notion of just in case as compared to just in time learning, I think we're going to have to completely revamp. This sense that you must go through all the hoops and bells and whistles just to get to a certain qualification, when in fact by the time you finish the qualification it's defunct because half of what you've learned is obsolete after 2 or 3 years. So people are completely rethinking that, getting more into just in time. When it comes to the education system, again, good people, they're climbing the wrong ladder. They need to look across the warehouse and see the other one and start to think of things like personalised education. And by personalised, I mean one-on-one at a very massive degree, where you can analyse quite accurately what a child can do and then give support accordingly. The technology is going to come into this in a big way.
One-on-one, you mean that's the medieval model, isn't it? You know, the priest, the master, teaching the novice. You know,
and what's old is good again, and new again. Increasingly, we're going to see the focus on what some people call enterprise skills, as compared to maybe just the academia as such. And don't get me wrong, math and science will still be prevalent for a long time. Though enterprise skills are the sort of things that will be, are relevant no matter what happens in work up ahead. Like anyone who tries to predict 10 years from now is full of it. And I'll have a go at it, and I'm sure some other people will, but I'm telling you straight, so many different, possibilities could occur. You can't begin to say what it will be like in 20 years' time. I could talk no work society, part work, us, becoming hybridised with robots, and so becoming some ultra being who actually does more effective work. So you can talk all of that sort of stuff. What you need are enterprise skills. So it's things like critical thinking, initiative, creativity. And my personal favourite, empathy, I think is going to become a massive, need with kids up ahead, because we're going to be challenged by robots that are already doing it reasonably competently, albeit at an artificial level.
Where would we see that today? Where would my audience, where would they see a robot today doing some of these things? Anywhere? Hospitals in Japan, maybe?
Yep, absolutely. Pepper is the best known robot with this one. Neo, as in Neo, is reasonably competent as well. And they have face recognition technology built into them so that their camera can see your face and detect any of the 3,000 micro expressions you make and then deduce quite accurately what you're thinking.
What happens if I'm using Botox?
Well, then we have, which will be relevant to you, what is called EQ radio, which can detect your heartbeat from a distance and then make a reasonable summation on your mood at the time, so that'll get past your Botox.
So Blade Runner, the lie detector in Blade Runner is right. It's here and now. It's not sci-fi. It's employment techniques.
It's here and now. And when we talk capitalism, we'll have people who walk into a store and then the person behind the counter will immediately know your mood, your intention, what you've put onto Facebook in the last couple of days, and then make a judgment accordingly on how to pay respect to you and then get some money out of you.
Okay, Adrian, is he right? I mean, he's talking about you. Did you finish school? Every time I interview an entrepreneur, half the time they may or may not have finished school, or they went to school, had their name signed off on the roll, and then raced off to their company. Did you finish school?
Just, and no university,
Sorry, okay.
Yeah.
So is what you're hearing so far right? Does this reflect, you're the entrepreneur, you are the model for this future wave, this exponential increase, where digital disruption is not just going to be something spoken about, but we're going to start seeing it in front of our eyes?
Yes. Yeah, no, I agree with all of the points so far. holistically. I think the ironic thing that's happened actually is there's been so much talk about, in the technology space, because so much of it works on code, there's been so much talk about we need to get kids into code. There's an awesome Brisbane startup called CodeBots, and they've spent 5 years and spent a lot of time and a lot of money working on a platform where the code writes itself, and there's a fair bit of this happening now. So you can feed in designs of a platform, and then it builds 90% of it, and then humans only have to do the last 10%. So
it's too late for school kids to learn coding at school?
Yeah, ironically now they're getting all the kids to code at school. It's not going to be necessary.
Okay, so it's too late. So it is too late for school students now to start writing code. You can buy a software program and it'll do it for you.
Yeah, like I guess probably for primary school, it'd probably just give up there. Like there's always going to be, you're going to need senior people, like, you know, experts, but it's what was discussed before about all that medium and low level stuff is going to be wiped out. So I agree with the empathy in terms of skills that are needed. Empathy, massively. Leadership is one that it's going to take a long time for AR to be able to lead others and lead a company, lead an organisation. So leadership, empathy, communication skills. Creativity is it's been spoken about a lot, and it's true. There's another startup called Ava, I think. I need to find it, but it's the first really cracker attempt at AI writing music, and it's beautiful. I'm a musician, and it shits on me.
Really? Okay. Yeah. David, what happened to capitalism, David? Capitalism was about supply and demand. You know, people had skill set. They could go to an employer and say, you can hire my skill set for X amount of money. But it looks like that nexus has been broken, or if it hasn't already been broken, something's really wrong. Doesn't that mean that capitalism as we know it is dead?
Oh, no, capitalism's with us, and it's going to be around for a while yet. And while the jobs are changing and the way that workers are controlled is changing and the way management's done is changing, the tools are changing, the basic concept of using somebody else's labour and extracting the surplus to create a profit, that's the concept that's still there. And so in turn, that means that, you know, the employment relationship, which is, you know, what we've been built on for the past several hundred years, that's going to remain in place too. Although you hear a lot about, you know, people becoming self-employed or working for Uber or whatever, behind it, there's still a company that's controlling, or there's an entity that's controlling and making the profit, and there's labour at the bottom that is, you know, working away to generate a surplus for somebody else's benefit, and that model is going to continue. Regardless of the technology that's in place, and regardless of whether the technology is in place, but dependent upon the choices that we make as to how we manage that technology. So I guess, like Tony said early on, the future isn't a threat, it's a promise. I'd say more that the future is a choice. It's something that we choose as to how we're going to manage those issues that come up in the future, because there are going to be big implications for the distribution of wealth and income and power, and we have to be making decisions about those because they seem to be influenced by technology.
Social choices and not technological destinies. And technology is not something that we humans are disrupted by. Humans have traditionally shaped and wielded technology to improve our lives and our circumstances. 100%. So the challenge here is to ensure that we are as much as possible empowered to work with technology. Not to be frightened of being displaced by it, and some of it is about understanding what technology can't do. And we have been doing some analyses which start to look at how demand for skills is changing over time.
And what have you seen? What has your research shown?
Yeah, so we've been able to link the occupational data from the Australian Bureau of Statistics with this really rich data set coming out of the US, where they got human resources managers across different sectors to rate for all the jobs and occupations that they manage, what kind of skills were needed in those jobs and what kind of domain knowledge was needed in those jobs. Now, we can match that back to over 100 occupations in Australia. So now when we see changing composition of the workforce, we can see what skills are being in more demand. And we broke that down into technical skills, into STEM skills, science, technology, engineering and maths, and communication people skills. And guess where the growth is? Not the STEM skills so much as the communication skills.
Hang on, stop. Yep, hang on. Okay, so it's too late to be learning code at school. STEM skills, I mean, you're one of, you know...
There is minutiae in this. So there's decreasing growth in people with science skills, bad news for me. And coding skills have not shown growth, possibly for the reasons you're mentioning. But the ability to work with numbers, the ability to design and adapt technology, vital, that bit's important. But the bit the robots aren't doing so well yet, and I haven't met whoever your robot was that can monitor my expressions, I find that very alarming.
Yes.
I'm not Botoxed yet, but I might go for it soon. What they can't yet do is build empathy and negotiate and have a service orientation, and that's why the employer will still want the human being.
So verbal, physical, emotional communication.
Making the client feel their problem has been understood and that somebody's found the solution that meets their needs and that they've...
But, Dr. Mason, this is a woman's world. Everyone knows that men don't listen.
And men's participation in the workforce is actually on the decline.
Is that right, David?
Yeah, that's right. And female participation's increasing, absolutely, yeah.
And it's because men are not good at communication, not good listeners.
I didn't say that.
Okay, then keep going. Keep going.
Actually, that's not quite true, but anyway, well,
keep going.
They're learned behaviours as compared to brain differences. So just a thought on the side there.
Okay, all right. Adrian, do you want to jump in there? So I've heard it said that that the future of work does look very good, often for people with certain disabilities, what we regard as disabilities. Children with ADHD, somewhere on the autism spectrum. They have certain areas where they're not as proficient as the greater percentage of the population, but there are other areas where they can streak ahead. And I'm told the guy, the financier, who was the feature of the latest finance movie that looked at the stock market crash, the guy whose name eludes me, he actually is on the autism spectrum, and he was the only guy that went through all the banking stock figures and analysed every single bank, you know, did it and said, no, the global financial crisis is coming, and bet against the banks and won.
Yes,
I'm sure the audience knows who I'm talking about. I can't think of the guy's name.
Yeah.
But this is someone who has on the autism spectrum, but he was able to be miles ahead of all the databases of the banks. He was out-predicting the computers. So is there seriously room for people with what we currently call disabilities or learning difficulties in the new world?
Yeah, there's two benefits, I think, is, a lot of the CEOs and entrepreneurs I know have some level of anxiety, ADHD, autism, like, we're a pretty weird bunch. So there's that, and so, I think there's a lot of opportunity there in a world where normally they were cast aside. But even more excitedly, Bill Gates talks a lot about, obviously there's a lot about universal basic income, which I'm sure we'll talk about at some point today, the concept of everyone in society being paid having a floor there of income, and then everyone can go above that. The benefits of that is seeing things like aged care and special needs care and things like that, having more of a stronger workforce behind those areas. So another benefit, which is sort of separate to your question, but for people with special needs, is better support for them, because you now got all of these people who have been freed up from other industries where their jobs become automated. Even though we're seeing care from robots, I think that empathy and all this, I think there's a long time that we've got ahead where the human touch will really work in those areas.
All right, well, let me ask you, Claire, if I can, about mature workers, and David, I'll get you to come in on this, but what you've just told me is mature people have life skills, life experience, they're good at picking up human signals. At the moment, we require that they retire, although we're now being told that they can retire later, and this may be where things are heading. So are there new future work opportunities for people who think their job career has passed them by?
Well, not if they think that.
Right. If they think that, no, but if they don't...
We have actually just completed a piece of work which is called Lifelong Participation Through Digital Technology. There's a number of ways in which digital technology enhances the opportunities for people in later life to participate both socially and economically. So you might have early onset dementia, but you can stay in your own home because the smart technology is going to remind you to take the medication and tell you that you forgot to turn off the stove. And some ambient light system is going to also make sure that your temperature hasn't gone too high. There's that kind of thing, but there's also the fact that our work is much less physically demanding, that it's much more easy for people to work in a more flexible way, so take on little bits of work, for people to start a business around a hobby. So all those things mean that older people who, yes, have the life experience, they also tend to have more capital behind them. They've got the spare room that they can rent out on Airbnb and the car that they can use as an Uber driver. There are a lot of opportunities for those older people, but here's the problem. Some older people are not confident in using digital technology. And in the past, when labour markets are disrupted, older workers tend to experience more of the redundancies than younger workers.
Is that right, David?
Yeah, that's right. And the other thing is that it's also more likely to have a lot of difficulty finding work again. So I've done some work looking at various industries, and the older workers in particular have greater difficulty getting jobs. They're more likely to end up retired, early retirement or forced retirement. And a lot of the areas where we're going to see a lot of the technological changes taking place are areas where there's going to be a lot of older people laid off, a lot of younger people as well. The bigger problem in terms of re-employment is with the older half of the population. And I don't think it's really just the attitudes of the people themselves. It's also employer attitudes. People face discrimination in the labour market, and it's very hard to prove. You put in a job application, it's very hard to prove that you weren't interviewed because you're over 45 or over 55 or whatever. But there's been various studies that have indicated that, there is discrimination in the labour market. And when you look at the political consequences of this structural change in the labour market, we've seen it in the US with the emergence of this support for Trump. We've seen it in the UK with Brexit, that if people are unable to be either re-employed in areas that, that they really want to be in, not everybody wants to be retrained from being a fitter and turner to being a barista. There's some pretty big issues there for structural change. I don't think that the problem is that we're not going to have enough jobs. The problem is that who's going to get those jobs, or that aspect of the problem is who's going to get those jobs, and what are we going to do as a society to make sure they're able to get them. Otherwise, we'll end up with our own version of what's been happening in the UK and the US.
Tony Ryan?
I'm imagining a lot of people came along tonight to find out the answer to the question of what jobs are waiting up ahead for kids especially, and maybe more chronologically gifted people as well, as you're indicating there. To draw the threads together on that, with people wanting that and with what these very smart people are saying, I reckon we need to rethink the sort of questions we're asking. Because quite often we ask things like, what are we going to do when robots maybe take over, and what are the jobs of the future, and what skills do people need, and all that sort of thing. I think we need to start asking things like, what sort of society do we want to live in, and then backward map from there, and we'll find the answers that we want to those other important questions.
We want to live in a just, good, fair society with opportunity. In
that case, start backward mapping from that and create that and go forward with it. I've had enough of people saying that they just have no power over anything anymore, and it's some disembodied fool in the States who's got trillions of dollars who powers everything. I think we've still got a lot of control over things. We purchase things each day. We need to make conscious decisions on what we do when we purchase those things and think of the implications of it.
Well, I'll be that disembodied fool in just a moment. But Adrian, so you're young and groovy. You're on the entrepreneurial edge. You look after startups. You help other startups. You've done your own startup. You've made all the mistakes. You've learned from your mistakes. Mm-hmm. Would you employ, a 50-something, overweight, balding, grey-haired guy
you're asking for a job,
his
Steve.
head around? He comes in, and you're going to make a social choice. You're going to make a social judgment about that person.
I think you'd be great on our videos, mate.
Can I work with this guy who looks like he's an anachronism from the previous century, which he is?
Yeah, we've got staff from, what was the youngest? Probably 20 through to, mid-60s for sure.
So what is it about you? You're an employer. What is it about you where you didn't discriminate? You got around what you see.
Yes.
And you went around that. What did that person, those people you employed, have that you said, I don't care about the visuals. I want that element of that, his character.
It's all attitude. I know, mid-60s people that are more vibrant and full of life than mid-20s people that complain and are talking about what Tony's talking about. Oh, poor me, it's so hard. Like, the barrier to entry is so low to do things now. The world's amazing.
Come on, this is capitalism. You've got to make profit. And you've got to say, hey, man, I like your attitude. You're on board. Come on, I'll give you my hard-earned cash.
But yeah, age does come with experience. There's some great things that come with age. I think on the resume front that David was talking about, which is definitely fair, bringing that up, is that I think there would be a lot of what would be happening is an employer sees applications coming in, and when they see an older age, they fear the salary expectations of that. So that's something that we probably have to overcome. It's like, we've got this job that we want done. I can get someone in mid-30s that I think could cost this, or mid-20s and versus 60. So there is that barrier to do. But for us, for all of our companies, we mostly recruit through word of mouth and connections and referrals. I haven't put a seek ad up for years.
I interviewed Steve Baxter a couple of times, and
yeah.
I said, okay, I've got a pitch, I've got an idea. What decisions are you going to make as to whether or not you'll back it financially and work with me? And I rattled them off, and he said, no, you're wrong. I said, well, what is it? And he said, the first question I ask is, can I work with you?
Yeah, should we have beers together?
Should we have a coffee, a beer, whatever?
Yes.
And the second question he said was, do you believe in your idea? Do you have faith almost in your idea, whatever your concept is? Is that right?
Yes, yeah, we definitely look for founders that have backed themselves at some level. There's plenty of people that have ideas that aren't willing to, trying not to swear here, this is difficult. So it's a lot of founders have an idea and they think that millions of dollars falls on your lap.
Mature age workers don't swear.
What's that? Yes, yeah. That's a benefit, yeah. That's another benefit. Yes, a lot of swearing happens in our office.
And do you know we're facing the longest ever retirement phase in history. So
Explain, Clement.
Well, people are living longer than ever before. And there is a massive problem around if these people will all still retire at 65, how we're going to fund the aged care and the welfare services. But also, do we really want people spending these years when they've still got plenty of capacity, isolated, disconnected, or could they be working in new ways? And I've heard people say now that we need to get rid of the term retirement and this differentiation between what's work and what is doing something meaningful.
Yeah. We talked before about what is it, you asked Tony, what future do we want? And that would be, yes, elderly people maybe being able to do more fun work or rewarding work and much less hours, but probably overall, I think people less hours of work for sure. I think you can see just people working harder and harder and having less time with family and everything. I think that ideal that we want to, world that we want to work towards is our time is much more leveraged because the simple things are automated and we can create and add value to people and do the things we care about and help others more versus just doing mundane stuff that is repeatable.
Steve, I heard a gerontologist once talking about the way that different age groups have mental models on how they see work, and they were saying that most people over 30 have a linear life plan where they live with a couple of parents for a few years who love them if they're lucky. They go to school, they get uni degree, they go and do a job for 45 years, they retire for 15 years and they die for 5. That
wraps it up tonight. Thank you very much.
That's the linear life plan, though most people under 30 see it very differently. So they do like the linear plan early on because they haven't got much choice. Their parents demand it and all that sort of thing. But as soon as they finish school, maybe go to uni, they then do their first 6 or 7 year cycle, which is where they learn and earn for 6.5 years and they retire for 6 months. And they go off and they learn the tango in Argentina or something. Then they come back at the age of 27 and they do another 7 year cycle where they go on to a completely new field and they learn and earn for 6 months there.
Get married, get divorced, next cycle.
And that's why you don't want to spend the first 23 years of your life solely investing in education when you're going to shift gears and directions.
Well, it's education for life. It's
in the current education,
that's where education must go. That's what people turn up tonight. They're obviously keen, so we don't have to preach to the converted here. They're prepared to do it. We need people who are constantly open to opportunity and learning.
We've got a real education model problem today.
We do.
Yes.
Can you give me 3 points to repair it, Claire Mason?
I think we've got to better integrate the classroom learning and the real world learning.
Yes.
Yep.
And that digital can help us with that. Digital can help match the student who's starting to become a pilot with a work experience opportunity. It might be just scheduling bookings at the local aviation centre. But digital technology is great at that kind of connection and hopefully can mean that you're not just studying for so long.
So if you want to be a pilot, see if you can just work at the checkout counter at the airline.
Yeah, and that's not easy to find those opportunities when you're a student with relatively few connections, but digital technology will help you. And on top of that, digital technology and platforms can help us deal with all those health and safety regulations, and the little pockets of work can be added up to give the security and the flow of income that a student needs to keep working. But also you learn better when you understand how it's relevant and you're going to apply it.
Tony Ryan, do you want to pick up on that, changing our schooling, our education system at the moment?
Just
one or 2 points.
I'll make just one. If I had a spare $1 trillion, I'd make sure that we had the most astonishing people as teachers. Now, you know, you'd hardly change it all completely right now. So what you do is you help the ones who are already there to be amazing, because they're basically modelling to kids what it means to be a grown-up. So if they're boring and tedious, these kids are looking at them going, is that what it's like to be a grown-up who's not that interested in what they're doing? So they need to be inspiring people who really care about life and their work. So we invest in the teachers. I think it's the most important profession on the planet because it actually creates all the other professions. So if you're that serious about talking about work, give unconditional support to teachers being astonishing, and then you will see change within 10 years in any society. And that's already been documented in different countries.
Adrian, given your experience, what would you change about our schooling, our education system?
I love those two. Those two comments, they're awesome. And so mine would be all of the, I don't want to use successful because that's narrowing it, but all of the people that I know that have made a big impact are really into mindset and personal, like the psychology aspect, personal development. They read the books, they do the courses, it's education, the self-education of sucking in information, and a lot of it can feel quite hippie, these things about training your mind, but why aren't kids reading Power of Now in school as much? Like why there's a curriculum that is there that works to an extent, but there's still a lack of teaching them how to think, I believe, and that's what I'm
We're working on it.
Yeah.
How do you teach wisdom?
If you get a chance while you're here at the State Library, you need to look at the Digital Futures display on this level, just on the other side here. It's worth, you can see some very useful, creative education techniques. Go to the sandpit. Yeah. Just trust me, who would have thought a sandpit was so interesting? Just go to it, you'll see what I mean. I won't say any more, but wash your hands afterwards. David, I want to change tack now. So you've given us a blueprint roughly for changing our schooling, our education system. David, Peetz, let me come to you. So I keep hearing that the people who are most vulnerable now, so Dr. Mason has told us that we ain't seen nothing yet, that actually the wave has just built and it's now going to start breaking. But I'm told that it's those low-skilled, poorly educated people who are going to be the victims of this. So the low-skilled at the moment, they tend to drive buses, cars, trucks, delivery, what have you. Is this right? Are the low-skilled people doing those sort of driving jobs at the moment? Are they? Can you speak to that?
Well, it's not so much the technology with which they're working. I mean, technological change over the past couple of 100 years has got rid of a lot of low-skilled jobs. And more recently, it's been moving much into the middle-skilled jobs than in the past. But the issue for the low-skilled workers is more their lack of power in the workplace. And so as these things develop, we're going to find they're going to be falling further and further behind, not so much because the jobs are disappearing, in some cases they will, but because they're getting less and less power in the workplace. And you mentioned the fourth industrial revolution at the beginning. And I must say, for me, the distinction between the third and the fourth can sometimes be a bit, as Doctor Who would say, wibbly-wobbly. But the thing that strikes me as being really the heart of the fourth industrial revolution is, because the third was basically about new technology and really about digital technology. And the big one is going to be when there's the merger of biological and the physical. And there's a little bit of that happening at the moment, like with cochlear implants and stuff like that. But there's people working on what are called neural implants. The idea that, in effect, you would have a computer embodied within your body. So up until recently, the technology has been separate from the person. And the big change is going to happen. Well, a big change is going to happen, possibly the biggest change, hence the revolution, I think, for a long time, when the technology becomes part of the person. Because then you're going to have a situation where, in the past, technology is introduced, there's productivity gains, there's a battle between capital and labour over who gets the surplus from that. It was fairly even distributed for a while. Capital has been getting most of the money from it recently, but there's that been happening. Once the technology is embodied within the person, then it's the person who accrues all the productivity benefits, which might on the one hand be seen as being, okay, so that gives labour the bargaining power. But it's going to be a very expensive technology, particularly in the early days. And that's going to mean there's going to be huge, massive productivity advantages and learning advantages and every advantage you can imagine in education and beyond for people who have access to the technology, which will be the people from the highest income groups. And you can have a real solidifying of the gap between the high income and the low income earners, the wealthy and the poor. And then the question will arise, okay, so shouldn't that technology be available to all? And, there's possibilities like we deal with that sort of issue with pharmaceuticals, with the way we price pharmaceuticals. If it becomes a more widespread technology, then there become issues of control because all computers are networked these days. There's not much point in having a computer if it's not part of some network. So then we've seen with the Snowden revelations and so on, the pervasiveness of surveillance technology. And so there's the future potential for control of the technology that's embodied within the person. What do we do about that? And
hacking humans.
Hacking humans, yeah, that's right.
Cyber security for bionic humans, yeah.
This is the Japanese story, Ghost in the Shell, which was a recent Hollywood movie, essentially.
Okay.
And I don't think it's like it's science fiction at the moment, but it's where technology is heading. I can't see a way around it. I can't see that the technological difficulties of Elon Musk or whoever it is being able to introduce neural implants is going to be too impossible to overcome. And so then it's a question of how do we deal with the social implications of that? And they will be absolutely enormous.
Claire Mason, do you want to speak to that? I mean, neural implants, you own the master control switch, you'll be controlling.
We've been trying to figure out some of the ways in which all these disruptions could play out. And we like to say that there are social choices rather than technological destinies. And we can see a future in which the potential of digital technology is not realised because you might see a real big rise in those cybersecurity threats, which means that there's going to be a legislative regulatory response which controls the extent to which that potential is realised. So, I mean, anyone who works in a large organisation these days knows how much their own potential is constrained by health and safety and bureaucracy and all the rest of it. It's got to happen to the technology too. Mm-hmm. So, it could go more than one way.
I want to be able to download how to fly a helicopter in a minute.
It's called the Matrix. Yeah. And oh, sorry, Steve.
You won't need to fly a helicopter because you'll actually be flying a drone.
This is true.
Yes.
And you will be able to fly that drone without the instructions, but it'll take you 3 minutes on a couple of joysticks, won't it?
Yes. Yeah, true. Or you'll just think and it will be doing it.
Yeah, and so you'll simply put your cranial device on.
We can already do that.
Right,
yes.
okay.
Yeah, we can
have
control
the cranial
machinery.
device.
Yeah.
In
The US Army knows how to do it. Yep.
Yeah. We're pretty good at getting the stuff out of the brain into tech. Mm-hmm. It's now going from outside in.
All right.
Is really as a simplified bit.
Look, this is wonderful news for me because I'm an Indian billionaire. And there's a little region in a country called Australia called the Galilee Basin. And they've got a mineral resource that's cheap as chips. And I want to use it to burn it, to provide electricity for the poor of my country and make a small profit on the side. And
with the help of the Australian government.
I have a business plan, and a number of years ago I started donating to politics. And that became a bit obvious. So then I started donating to community centres in Townsville, helping fund a few little community prizes in Mount Isa, just so that the local population get to know me and to know that I'm the humanitarian that Tony Ryan wants in the world of the future. And I've got an application. I've been going through environmental hurdles to build my mine. And I've said, look, I've got heaps of jobs. If you're a retiree and you know how to ride a backhoe, well, I can retrain you to drive a big truck. If you're a bus driver or a train driver who's been made redundant from Queensland Rail and you can't get a job back there, I have a coal train that I think I can drive. I'll train you, I have a job for you. David Peetz, am I going to employ people to drive my trains, my trucks and my diggers?
Well, no, actually, you're not.
Why aren't I, David?
There's going to be somebody sitting in Townsville or Brisbane or wherever pressing the buttons, and you'll have little trucks going, collecting the coal, taking them to the rail line if the rail line gets built. Let's assume that it does, and taking it out to port. And the whole process, as it's designed to be by you, is totally automated.
Well, I employed Adrian. This is why I employed him.
Yes.
He wrote me a program.
Yeah, that's right. So I think the estimate was that nationally, like including both how many people you would employ and how many people would be employed in all the rest of the industries, was going to create about 1,500 jobs. And when you divide that by the amount of subsidy, it's a pretty awful sum.
So my trains are going to be driverless, my trucks are going to be driverless, and I'm going to have, a big screen in a capital city somewhere, and a bunch of Adrian's nerd mates on joysticks or just hitting preset buttons that send the truck on a preset path out of an open cut mine, and it's all run by digital electronics.
Yeah, that's right. And it's basically how it's being done in Western Australia at the moment. A large part of the iron ore industry in Western Australia is along that model. They're picking up for the new anonymous mine in Queensland and so on. And it's being used in the docks or the waterfront is basically they're unloading ships now, stacking them, putting them into trucks basically through automated technology.
This is what the wharfies dispute was about in 1999. So
yeah,
like
that's right.
Human beings.
What wharfies? In some of the ports there's basically there's almost nobody in the yards. There's a guy walking around controlling things, but that's it. Basically, all the people. There's nobody now driving in a couple of the ports. Those big crane things you saw on the show about the waterfront dispute a few years ago.
Dr. Mason, you told us that these are about social choices, or they're about personal choices. Have we made the right choice here? Some people like to work. I mean, this is all of a sudden, the robot's taken over.
Well, we're not saying there won't be jobs for people in the future. We just think they're going to be quite different. So,
what will they be?
So maybe the supermarket won't exist in the future because your fridge and your washing machine have ordered all your basic groceries. No more horrible music and fluorescent lighting, but perhaps what happens, instead of meeting a checkout chick, you go into a lovely cafe, a little bit like a kitchen school as well, where a lovely lifestyle advisor talks to you about some of your aspirations and introduces you to some of the new products and services that you might like to consider adding to your fridge's memory or whatever it is, and also gives you a bit of advice on how to use those products the best way to make your hair beautiful and your diet more healthy and support your spiritual growth.
She'll probably be giving you advice on how to improve your productivity so you don't get the sack.
So Claire, this is happening, so robotics is happening in Western Australia at the moment, and it's going to happen here if I get my way with my mine. Where could I be looking to aim my employment of the future? Where could I be
Services sector.
Services.
Health. So we're living longer, but more mental health problems, more chronic diseases, more obesity. So we're going to need people who help us use that longer life to best effect by eating better, but also perhaps making better choices in our lives. So healthcare, aged care and education, because we're all having to re-educate and upskill all the time, are going to be huge. And nobody's saying that we won't need doctors in the future. Where you want to be is a job where the technology makes you more effective, not a job where the technology can do what you do.
And the edge will be good communication skills, ability to empathise, ability to listen.
And ability to work with technology.
And ability to work with technology.
Yep.
All right, in a couple of moments I'll be opening up the floor to questions. So I might just give you a chance just to sort of state a vision statement, if I can. I'll start with you, Adrian. So the future of work, you're the person who you've employed someone for 6 months, and they've said, okay, mate, I'm out of here. I'm going to be the lifestyle consultant that Dr. Mason mentions. I'm going to pull coffees and give people advice in my lifestyle salon.
Yes.
So what does the future look like to you?
Yeah, interesting, because I'm in the startup space. I think nearly everyone in our core team we've got Pitch Black and then we've got some other assets, but in our core team, I think nearly every single one of them will end up starting their own thing. So that in the millennial age group, the barrier is so low now to be able to add value to someone, whether that's through technology or services, advice, education. The barrier is so low to get off the ground. The cost is plummeting of producing technology, or whether it's hardware or software, or learning yourself so that you can teach others. So I think it's good. I think we haven't talked much about UBI, universal basic income, but I think that's going to be, if all the jobs are disappearing, what happens? We haven't really addressed that much. Probably a lot of people are here but that Bill Gates and Elon Musk, Sam Altman from Y Combinator, a lot of big people are experimenting and playing around with that, and it's just the concept of having a floor of earnings for everyone. That's more than what a normal pension would be, right? And then the opportunity to do things above that. And most people, the big people doing the innovation stuff, are thinking that that's where it's going to head.
Tony, Ryan, did you want to jump in there?
I love, the stuff that Adrian keeps talking about, and can we have a coffee later on sometime? I'd love to take that sort of stuff further. I like to think 10 years or further ahead, which is near impossible, but it's worth doing anyway. And I'm wondering if one scenario is that we're going to go beyond work at a level where we're doing it ourselves, but we have an emulation that is made of us in terms of our brains or our capacities in some form. We transpose that into some type of artificial intelligence. It's put into some, hybrid, some, entity that goes away and does the work for us, and then we go on holidays all the time, and we actually earn the income from them. And before you think I'm stirring here too much, I think it's a very real possibility, because I hear people saying they're so scared of what's happening up ahead with not much work. In fact, I think there's a lot of merit to not much work, because every time I go to a party, people just whinge and moan about working. And so, they can't have their cake and eat it as well. They complain about work, don't like it, they want to win gold lotto, and yet, they go...
Well, I like work. I see work not as a job, but as a vocation.
But you just asked me for a job before.
Yeah, I have fun.
Mate,
I have fun if it's a vocation. I'm not sure that I want to do that. For me, I enjoy it. It's escape from family life.
Yeah. See, Steve, it depends on what work is. I mean, if work means helping Gladys, who's 92 years old, and the next door neighbour to go shopping once a week, and doing volunteering work every day or week or month, what is work? So it's contribution. See, I'm really concerned about kids growing up, becoming excellent sheep, derogatory expression, but that's what's happening to some of them, and they just... they don't see work as like a contribution to life. They see it as something just to make enough money to go off, to Aspen 3 times a year. They need to see it as contribution. So whatever it is you do needs to be contribution. So you wake up in the morning going, I'm going to make the world a bit better today.
I'd argue that the younger generations care more about why and purpose-driven work than...
And I think they do, though there is some, the systems seem to be just getting them through the hoops just to make it there so they can say, thank God we got them through here, which is why education's in trouble, because, up to a point, because it's going, there's a job at the end for you, which is just a false promise.
Okay, David, you've been looking at work for a long time. How do you see the future of work from your perspective?
Well, I can see a couple of possibilities, actually, a couple of futures. One is like Claire's future of sitting in the cafe and having a good time with a lifestyle consultant and so on. And the other is, well, it's like an adaptation of Orwell's 1984, really, where there's the masses of what is referred to by Orwell as the proles, who basically don't have access to the technology, in insecure work, displaced older workers who then get robo-letters from whatever Centrelink is called in the future.
Robolink.
And it's like probably the main difference with Orwell's vision is that I think he was too conservative in his view of the degree of technological control over the elite. And that's sort of like when you watch, there was a fabulous movie made in 1984 which was very realistic to the book with Richard Burton and John Hurt and so on. And his vision of the technology was way out. But he wasn't writing a book about technology, he was writing a book about the future and the future social order. And when the choices we face are choices about the social order, and then how we deal with technology and what technology does to us or for us depends upon the choices we make about the social order.
All right, I have to give the audience a chance to ask some questions. Hands up, please. No questions without microphones, so we'll get a microphone to you. If you want, there's a gentleman up the back here with the glasses and the check shirt straight down there.
Looking cool.
And then one right up the back. Annie, if you can, right up the very top there. Lady right up the back corner. Thank you very much. The microphone is yours, sir.
Thank you.
It's on.
Okay. I remember reading an article saying that during the first revolution, during the back in the 1800s, one of the biggest issues when you go through these changes is that people do get hurt during the transitional phase, and you kind of think of the transitional phase that we're about to go through, particularly as that exponential curve gets steeper. You think of, say, the budget that was handed down over in the States just last night, I think, and how over there are greater differences in wealth between the haves and the have-nots, and yet it seems to be that those people that are being impacted the most by it are actually going to suffer the most.
So your question is, just forgive me.
My question is, what I've heard tonight is all very positive, which is fantastic, but how do we actually try and change the politics out there that allows a smoother transition, that allows people not to get hurt in the process? I think technology is fantastic, but we just got to make sure that we all share in those benefits as technology change occurs.
David, the politics, how do you get that change happening?
Yeah, well, I guess in the future there lie revolutionary times, and we don't know which way it's going to go. And if people are displaced and they feel victimised, and then they get those Centrelink robo letters and the like, then the sort of reaction we've seen in the US is a sort of political reaction that's likely to be very widespread. There is that danger. You take it to extremes, you're looking at the fascistic sort of responses. It's potentially very scary. Depending upon how well the other parts of society organise, there might be a coherent alternative put forward. We might be able to find ways to redeploy, re-employ people in productive and socially useful work. These are big issues that a whole lot of groups in society are yet to face. Community organisations, environmental organisations, trade unions, political parties, they've all got to be looking at these issues. I don't think we can say at the moment what the outcome will be.
Can I just mention, I'll pick up on that and I'll ask a question at the back, that I'm always astounded when people write letters to the station, send emails, phone talkback, and I say, have you called your local, state or federal politician? And they say, oh, what's the point? So in other words, get on the phone, write them a letter, because believe you me, they have a database. So every time you write to your local member of parliament, they put your name in a database, they look at your postcode, they look at the average income of that postcode, they can match a whole set of data and they can tell a whole lot more about you, and they can go on Facebook and they know who you slept with last night. And so they actually have the data on you, so when you contact your parliamentarians, they do want to know and they do listen. You mightn't see it in public debate, but believe you me, there's no point complaining if you're not actually complaining to the person who represents you. So you have to get onto your local, state or federal parliamentarians. Right up the back corner. Madam, please.
Hi. Is that working?
Yeah, it's on, yes.
Okay. Okay, I feel like my question is a little bit left of centre, but I thought I would ask it anyway. And it's to do with cryptocurrencies, such as Bitcoin or Ethereum. And I'm actually wondering if you guys think there's any potential in that, in terms of what kind of currency we might have in the future. Are we going to continue to have a centralised government-run currency, or is there potential for these actual currencies to become some kind of reality that people need to learn more about?
Currency is just a means of exchange, essentially, isn't it? So, Adrian or Dr. Mason?
Yeah, I think, I don't know a great deal about this, but I think what we are seeing is the disruption of the traditional banks. I ask a lot of people my age, if you could put your money in a Google bank account, would you feel safer with that than in a traditional Australian bank? Everyone says yes. So that's a sign, and of course cryptocurrency is exploding, but whether it be cryptocurrencies or going with larger providers, Facebook or Google, to hold your money, and us seeing that happening and having centralisation of finance globally. I think there's definitely going to be some big changes. There was an interesting Barclays in the UK. The CEO thinks that there's no problem, and it reminded me of Blockbuster. The article I read referenced a quote from the CEO. Yeah, he said, where Netflix aren't even on the radar at all for us. And it showed like the rubble of a Blockbuster store. So yeah, I think banks, not much trust there, not much brand equity with consumers. And as the generations get older, I think we'll see a lot of fragmentation in finance. Yeah.
All right. I think just third in there. Thank you very much. Then we'll go up the back where Annie is. Thank you. Yes, please. Your question.
Hi, Steve. Sorry, don't take this personally. I've noticed, you've carried the words for a long time about digital disruption.
Yep.
Can I actually say, I would love to see it, and I'm really glad tonight, and I'm putting some words together in terms of disruption and disability. How about we look at it as opportunity and ability? And I think what tonight has been really about has brought out that perhaps some of those ones with what we see as uniqueness are the ones that are creative. They have that instinct because they're not seeing the world as another place, which actually takes them into that leadership. And what takes them into that leadership is that empathy or those extra skills that they've got to survive in the world. And I think that's where we're going.
So your concern is that we're sheep, and our questioner is saying that people with disabilities are not sheep. They actually see things and experience things very differently. Have I summarised you? Right. Yeah. Tony?
I agree.
Yes. Okay, that's it.
Well, profoundly. In fact, if an education system isn't based on that belief, I want anyone who's in that system out.
Well, just one final comment is, I have a son with a disability. The irony is, the best tutor and the best work has been done by a past student that's only 2 years older than him. Why? Passion.
Mm. So those communication skills. Tony, do you want to say something else?
Oh, no, that just fits with what I was saying before about amazing teachers.
Okay.
Yeah.
Up the back, Annie, thank you very much. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Do you think that we'll one day see something like Westworld happen in real life? In other words, for those who haven't seen it, basically, it's like is capitalism, the engine of capitalism, basically the acceleration of a car, and are we approaching sort of a constant speed in society or in the economy?
I could have a coffee with you as well. Yeah, interesting thinking.
Can I pass that one? I haven't seen the show.
Okay. All right, I can speak to that. I can tell you that when everything is connected, everything is hackable. Westworld was when the robots went awry. I can tell you a quick little anecdote that to show how connected things were, a couple of hackers recently were able to hack a sex toy that was radio linked, and the privacy concern was the sex toy was purchased electronically. You could tell who purchased the toy and when they undertook their romantic activities. So once the Internet of Things, where everything is connected and everything is wired, if it's not the Westworld scenario where robots think for themselves, you'll certainly have one of Adrian's mates having a lot of fun. Now, Annie, there was a gentleman who had the 3 lines. Yes, terrific, sir. Please, yes. Go, microphone. Sorry, my apologies. We'll get down here. Sorry.
Just a quick question to, I think it was David, who mentioned the fact that capitalism as it is, I think, to paraphrase what you said, will continue the way it is. Do you absolutely believe in that? Because to me, what we're talking about here is the future of work, and jobs as they are changing right now. I very much doubt that 10 years from now we'll have the same structure for jobs and the same types of jobs as we do today. Do you think capitalism as the base foundation is going to stay like this?
So you think it's about choices, David, a fork in the road. It's either 1984 or Brave New World, I guess.
So I didn't hear the first part of your question at all, so
his question is that surely capitalism is going to change. With all of this, capitalism, it's the nature of capitalism is going to change.
Whether capitalism changes or not depends upon how well people who want to change it are organised. And that's a very difficult thing to predict, because in the middle of the 20th century, the union movement looked very strong. Now it looks quite the opposite. environmental movement is much stronger now than it was 30 or 40 years ago. It's hard to predict how social movements will emerge and what sort of political pressures they will bring about to force changes in regulation that in turn will bring about changes in capitalism. Like we've got a phase of market liberalism at the moment, sometimes it's called neoliberalism, that basically arises from changes in regulation that date back to the 1980s and 1990s. And you know, it's hard to make predictions, you know, some people do, about whether or not the present model will continue, whether it will break down and something else will emerge in its place. I find it hard to believe that the present model is sustainable, but, you know, people have made mistakes in the past. I just want to go back to that earlier question, the Westworld question. I haven't seen the series, but I saw the movie many years ago. And I guess the other thing that comes into this technology, and Steve sort of mentioned it, is we assume things are going to work, and often they don't. And, you know, you go along to, you know, some technological fair about they're showing the latest advance in AI or whatever, and actually, oh, you should have been here 10 minutes ago or yesterday or whatever. And I keep on thinking of a bot, an online bot that Microsoft, I think it was, tried out a few months ago to answer any question at all, and artificial intelligence. It only lasted for a few hours because it very quickly started sprouting racist, sexist ideology.
Was it a human?
Because it was learning from its use, learning from the people as it was interacting with. That's, you know, how AI learns, is it learns from who it interacts with. So they had to take it offline pretty quickly, for reasons that are pretty obvious. So we shouldn't assume that all of the time these things will work. So the thing I like about Westworld is it shows things malfunctioning, and that to me is highly plausible. It's highly plausible.
And it provides jobs for people like Adrian.
Yeah, that's right.
Tony, did you want to address the question about surely the fundamentals of capitalism are going to change?
Yes.
How?
For a couple of reasons. One is additive technology, like 3D printing. Within 5 years, most products will be made for free or next to free. You'll order your pizza in, it'll just print in your house. The 3D printer will print houses and apartments for a fifth of the present cost. It's going to completely revolutionise the way that we pay for products on this planet. And so the power will go to people who have the IP over the 3D printed object. So that's one thing that's going to come through. I don't think we're going to need as much money, but I can often be wrong on this. The other one is conscious capitalism. If I was going to do a song and dance tonight, it would be on that. I think it is one of the most powerful things we could do in terms of capitalist societies. And it's where we talk about things like the 50-50 clubs, with like Richard Branson with his Plan B as compared to Plan A. Like Plan A is profit before purpose. Plan B is purpose before profit. And some very, very switched on people are on board with all of this. So, you know, there's greater profit made when you are a conscious capitalist business, like up to 10 times more. And I triple checked that data. It's just mind-blowing. So it's just sitting there waiting for us. Conscious capitalism and also the additive printing. So in response to your question about capitalism, I reckon there's going to be some big stuff going on.
All right, thank you. A question down the front here, sir. Thank you very much. Your question, please.
Thank you. An easy one for you. Australia is already one of the most urbanised countries in the world, if not the most. What effect do you see the new technology having on that? Do you see a great desert in the centre of Australia and lots of big cities, or what, and how would you reverse it?
The promise of the National Broadband Network was supposed to be that you're a farmer sitting on your cattle property out Longreach, and you would have the information superhighway to your market in Indonesia, and that would attract your children back to the family property, because at the moment there's no women in Longreach, so they leave, they go to university, they get married, they get a job as a stockbroker and go to Sydney. And so the farm collapses and all the two generations of hard work's finished. The promise of the National Broadband Network was supposedly to connect the desert, to connect the regional areas. Now, they've done that. They've got 2 satellites.
But you'll need less farms.
Maybe. Did anyone speak to that? How it will change Australia?
Agriculture?
Yeah. Or remote Australia? Or,
Remote Australia.
yeah.
Regional Australia.
Will Longreach become the capital of Queensland?
Not sure about that, but I think Yeah, I think it is Elon Musk and a few other people are looking at on the connection thing, because it doesn't seem to be happening. Like, my internet doesn't work that well in West End in our office. It still seems pretty slow. It says 100 megabits down, but it seems pretty bloody slow. But yeah, they're looking at doing it all through satellites, like one holistic satellite network from outside. So just one big 4G pretty much. That's super, super fast. And if I agree with that, because you notice on your phone, often the 4G seems so much faster on your phone than it is on your computer on the Wi-Fi in the city. So I think that's the solution, instead of billions of dollars of infrastructure on the ground. So, and I love that. I love that remote will get to the point where there's no big advantage of inner city other than networking connections. But in terms of infrastructure, I love that it's not too far away. With the types of people, the big people that are trying to fix this globally, instead of in country by country, we're not too far away from that.
You do get some more people living away from the cities, working in the cities remotely. At the edges, there's less than 1% of people probably that are doing that sort of thing. It'll have some marginal effect. Probably the biggest force for regional development in IT at the moment, from the government's point of view, is McDonald's Wi-Fi in Tamworth, because that's where they sent that government agency out, and all the poor people doing that were forced to work out there. It seems to me there's a big logic that's been forcing people into cities over the past 100 years, 200 years, and I can't really see anything big in technology that's going to reverse that logic in a big way. At the margins, being able to work from home and so on, but I don't think it's going to have a transformational effect.
Agreed.
All right, thank you very much. Another question up the... sir, thank you very much.
It's great to see how many people are interested in the topic of the future of work.
It's exciting, yeah.
I wonder whether it's not inextricably linked to the future of government. Everything tonight's been about individuals and skilling people and opportunities, and we've talked about the mine up in the north, where a private enterprise operator is going to get $1 billion loan from the federal government and $320 million royalty relief from the Queensland government. That is $1.32 billion, and everything's been talked about skilling people. Why are we investing in the profit of a company that is going to use robotics and automation when we should be investing in people and social enterprise?
I can answer that. Would you like me to answer that?
I don't want to defend politicians, though. One of you guys can.
The Lady Salento Hospital, that's why. Because the key benefit of that is for the state treasury coffers, and they have to employ the great teachers that Tony wants. They have to run the Lady Salento Hospital that you're going to go to when your AI goes weird in your car and you have an accident. In other words, what the benefit does is from the royalties, which everyone agrees is way too low, but the royalties, they go into state treasury coffers, and that's how they built this building. This building was not built by a private company. This building was built by you, and your taxes, your payroll tax, your land tax, your stamp duty, and royalties from all of the mines throughout Queensland. So that's where that money goes. It actually goes into the treasury coffers. The money they take from the royalties goes into the treasury coffers. But would someone else like to speak to that?
So, Steve, you started to raise this half an hour ago. It's like the ethical considerations you take into account when you're making choices politically, and this guy's raising this, and it's a really apt point. Given that, like, by 2100, 100% of all power on this planet will be created by renewables. So,
but you can't predict 2100.
Or thereabouts. The hard data says, you mate, go for it. The hard data says 2050 will be 50%. Point being, trying to make those choices, and hey, I don't get a job out of this Adani thing going in, and if I did, maybe I'd be seeing it differently, and I pay respect to that one too. And we do need that money for the teachers and so making those choices, I don't know how that can be done, where the ethical determination is made on what is the best decision for society. Good luck to the politicians. And by the way, I think it's our problem. I think we're the problem with politicians, not the politicians in a lot of cases. Who'd be a politician today? It's impossible, no matter what you do. It's worse than yes, Minister.
Digital technology can enable more active citizenship.
Yes.
So, for example, when people provide feedback to government on decisions like that, it's now possible for the weight of that input to be evaluated based on whether the person actually took the time to read the full web page or the full report that was the briefing document. So, that kind of thing could help us to be making better choices instead of really loud minority groups skewing perceptions and things like that.
I want to finish with you, if I can, please, Dr. Mason. We're on that tidal wave. The wave is about to break. We ain't seen nothing yet. Up until now, your argument is that more, as technological disruption occurs, more jobs have been created than have been taken away.
Historically, yes.
So, in theory, we should be celebrating the technological change, not fearful of it.
As long as we are digitally empowered and highly skilled, yes.
Thank you for coming. Please welcome our panel. Thank you very much for coming. If you've been watching on the stream, we're very grateful. We hope you found it rewarding and useful. The library is holding another event with ABC Radio on the 9th of August. Smart Cities for Everyone. We'll find out if regional areas are going to change geographically and with infrastructure. Have a wonderful night. Best of luck for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Senator Claire Moore, I interview all the time on ABC. I simply fell into it. Thank you very much.